Imagine 80,000 people packed tightly into a massive concrete stadium.
Yeah, just pitch black everywhere.
Exactly, pitch black, except for,
Yeah.
this absolute sea of lighters and glowing cell phone screens just swaying back and forth in the dark.
It is a powerful image.
It really is.
Yeah.
And every single person in that arena has their head thrown back, and they are just belting out the lyrics to the same song at the absolute top of their lungs.
Right, experiencing this profound communal joy.
Yes, a shared moment of pure triumph. But here's the thing. What they are completely missing, what frankly almost everyone misses in that moment, is that they are actually singing along to a terrifying, real-time psychological breakdown.
It is wild when you really think about it.
So today, we are doing a deep dive into an absolute masterpiece of musical storytelling. We are, tearing down those stadium walls to look at the raw, uncomfortable anatomy of Pink Floyd's 1979 track, Comfortably Numb.
From the monumental concept album, The Wall.
Right. And I want to welcome you to today's deep dive, because we have this incredibly dense stack of notes to get through to figure out how this song actually works.
It really is one of the most fascinating paradoxes in modern music, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you have this massive unifying rock anthem that is, at its core, fundamentally about total, inescapable human isolation. It kind of redefines what a song is even capable of doing to a listener.
And to really grasp how it does that, we have to talk about what The Wall actually is first. Because, you cannot just listen to this track in a vacuum.
No, definitely not.
It is a concept album.
Yeah.
It was a linear, cohesive narrative. If you just shuffle the tracks on a playlist, you are completely destroying the experience.
Yeah, you lose the whole thread.
Exactly. You'd be like ripping the chapters out of a novel, just throwing them up in the air and trying to read them in whatever random order they land on the floor.
Right.
You were supposed to be following a character step by step through a very specific, really agonizing journey.
And that is a crucial distinction to make right up front. A concept album like The Wall, it demands something very rare from its audience.
Active listening.
Precisely. Active listening. It requires you to track a protagonist's emotional arc over the course of, an hour and a half.
Right. It is a commitment.
It is. So by the time we actually arrive at Comfortably Numb in the sequencing of the album, we aren't just dropping in on a catchy chorus. We are walking right into the climax of a tragedy.
So let's step into that specific scene, because the protagonist of this story is a rock star named Pink.
Right.
And by this point in the narrative, Pink is entirely, completely burned out.
Yeah, he's gone.
He has built this metaphorical wall between himself and the rest of the world, like brick by brick. And he has completely isolated himself from society. But it is not just that he is hiding in a hotel room, right? I mean, it is much worse than that.
Oh, it is a profound internal withdrawal. Pink hasn't just locked the door. He has basically retreated from his own consciousness. Yeah, he has slipped into a full catatonic state right before he is scheduled to perform a massive arena show.
Right. The timing is terrible.
He is entirely unresponsive. His physical body is there, just slumped in a chair in the hotel room, but his mind is completely shut down.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the arrival of our antagonist, who is a cynical doctor.
Yes, the doctor.
And at first glance, you might think, oh, a doctor, someone is finally here to help him.
Which makes sense, normally.
Right, but based on the sources we're looking at, that is completely wrong.
Exactly. We have to strip away the inherent trust we usually associate with the medical profession to really understand what is happening in this room.
Okay.
This doctor isn't there to offer therapy or compassion or, to check Pink into a psychiatric facility so he can actually heal.
Right.
His entire purpose, his only purpose, is to inject Pink with a massive dose of drugs solely to get him vertical and out onto the stage.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I was thinking about how to visualize this.
Yeah.
Think of this doctor not as a medical professional, but as a frantic pit crew mechanic working on a severely damaged race car.
Okay, I like that.
Right. The mechanic knows the engine block is cracked. He knows that if he forces the car back out onto the track right now, the engine is going to completely explode and the car will be permanently destroyed.
Right, it is a fatal flaw.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But a mechanic doesn't care. That is not his problem. He just needs to patch it up with duct tape and wire just enough to get it to cross today's finish line.
Because of the corporate sponsors?
Yes. Because there are corporate sponsors up in the VIP box demanding a return on their investment. Pink is that car. And the doctor's just throwing whatever chemical duct tape he has at the problem.
That is a perfect way to visualize it, actually, because if we connect this to the bigger picture, it completely encapsulates the ruthless show must go on mentality of the late 1970s rock machinery.
Yeah, it was brutal back then.
It was. The sheer lack of empathy in this treatment is staggering. The artist's mental health, his fundamental humanity, it is entirely irrelevant.
He is just a product.
Exactly. Pink is an asset. He is a piece of heavy machinery that is currently malfunctioning. And this doctor is simply the technician sent by the corporate machine to ensure the revenue stream isn't interrupted by something as, inconvenient as a nervous breakdown.
But surely the doctor realizes that this is going to kill Pink in the long run. I just struggle to believe anyone could be that brutally indifferent to a person sitting right in front of them.
Well, he probably does realize it. But the terrifying reality of the narrative is that the long run simply doesn't matter.
Wow.
Yeah. The doctor is dealing with the immediate crisis of a canceled show. And this represents a pivotal moment in Pink's psychological collapse.
How so?
Well, think about it. When the very people who are socially designated to care for your well-being are instead actively facilitating your destruction for profit, your reality becomes incredibly hostile.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. Pink is entirely stripped of his agency here. He is just a passenger in his own body, being chemically propped up like a marionette. This is the total collapse of his connection to the outside world.
It is incredibly dark.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, how on earth do you translate a narrative that heavy, a dynamic that bleak, into a piece of music?
It is a tall order.
It really is. Like, how do you make people physically feel that specific hostility just through sound?
Well, this is where the sheer genius of the composition takes over. Because the story of the Doctor and Pink isn't just being told through the lyrics.
Right.
The narrative is literally coded into the foundational chords of the song. The internal struggle and the external conflict are mirrored by a stark, deliberate musical contrast.
Very fascinating.
Yeah, the architecture of the sound itself is doing just as much storytelling as the words are.
So let's break that architecture down, starting with the verses.
Okay.
The verses represent the doctor's point of view. He is assessing Pink, asking him if there's anybody in there, telling him to nod if he can hear him.
Right, the interrogation.
Exactly. And musically, these verses are driven by a cold, dark B minor chord progression. So why B minor?
To understand why this works so well, we have to look slightly at the physics of sound.
Okay, I'm with you.
A minor chord, like B minor, has a flattened third note in its scale. Without getting too bogged down in the math, this specific combination of frequencies creates a slight acoustic dissonance.
Like they are clashing.
Yeah, exactly. The sound waves don't perfectly align, and the human brain interprets that slight dissonance as tension, instability, or melancholy.
Yeah.
It has this inherently clinical, unresolved feel to it.
It literally feels rigid. Like when you listen to the verses, it feels like the music is demanding Pink's compliance.
Yes.
I always picture it's being trapped into those buzzing, harsh fluorescent lights in a cold, windowless room.
Fluorescent lights is exactly right. It is completely sterile. The bass line just plods along, methodical and unfeeling, just like the doctor barking his assessments and giving his orders.
It's clinical.
Very clinical. It is the sonic equivalent of a clipboard and a syringe.
But then, right when that tension feels almost unbearable, we hit the choruses.
Yes, the shift.
And the contrast is immediate. The music suddenly shifts out of that dark B minor and opens up into this massive, sweeping, warm D major.
And just as the minor key created dissonance, a major key like D major provides harmonic resolution.
Oh, I see.
The frequencies of a major chord align perfectly. So when those sound waves hit your ear, your brain actually registers it as stability, relief, and safety. The tension just vanishes.
Wow.
And narratively, this shift represents Pink's internal reality.
So while the doctor is operating out in the cold B minor of the physical hotel room, Pink retreats entirely into D major.
Yes.
He completely leaves the room in his mind, just fading back into his childhood memories. Specifically, he is recalling a fleeting moment of a childhood fever.
Right, when his hands felt like two balloons.
Exactly. A time when he felt disconnected and hazy, but paradoxically, incredibly safe.
Because when you are a child with a fever, you are usually being cared for. You are wrapped in blankets, the world outside your bedroom feels distant and muffled, and all your responsibilities are just gone.
Right, you are protected.
Yeah, it is a disconnected comfort.
So what does this all mean? If the cold B minor is the demanding, sterile reality of the doctor forcing him back to work, does this warm D major shift imply that Pink's catatonia isn't just a physical collapse?
Where are you going with this?
Was it actually a desperate, brilliant defense mechanism, like a way for his mind to generate a safe warmth to protect him from a brutally cold reality?
What's fascinating here is how the musical structure validates exactly that interpretation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it isn't just a pretty melody changing, it is a literal shift in perspective and emotional reality for the listener.
Okay, explain that.
By shifting from the tension of B minor to the resolution of D major, the music physically pulls us, the audience, out of that sterile hotel room and drops us directly into the sanctuary of Pink's mind.
We feel the exact relief that he feels.
Exactly. The music forces our brains to process the same dopamine hit of safety that Pink is experiencing in his memory.
That is incredible.
We understand on a visceral level why being comfortably numb is so alluring to him in this moment. The real world is a cynical doctor with a needle and 80,000 screaming fans waiting to consume him.
Right.
But the internal world is a warm, golden memory of childhood safety. Of course, his mind chooses the latter.
It is emotional manipulation at its finest. They are using the mechanics of the chords to manipulate our empathy.
Absolutely.
And that structural duality, the minor versus the major, the doctor versus Pink, it actually mirrors the real-world creative duality that brought this song into existence, doesn't it?
It really does. A song with this level of extreme internal contrast usually comes from a dynamic and, often fraught creative process.
Yeah, the tension behind the scenes.
Exactly. And in the case of Comfortably Numb, there was a very specific division of labor between two incredibly distinct creative forces that generated this masterpiece.
We were talking about Roger Waters and David Gilmour. From what we know of the writing process, Roger Waters provided the lyrics. He crafted the cynical narrative of the doctor and the deeply personal internal monologue of Pink's memory.
Right.
Meanwhile, David Gilmour wrote the music. He built the chord progressions and the melodies.
And that partnership, which was famously full of friction and tension, as you mentioned, is what generated the track's legendary emotional weight.
How so?
Well, Waters brings the sharp narrative bite. He provides the critique of the corporate machine and the raw psychological trauma. He is the cold reality of the room.
Right, the B minor.
Exactly. Gilmour, on the other hand, brings the atmospheric, sweeping musicality that gives that trauma a deeply human emotional resonance. He provides the warmth of the fever dream.
The D major.
You got it.
Huh.
The song exists entirely in the tension between those two opposing forces.
Which brings us to the climax of the song, the moment where that tension finally boils over.
Right.
We have to talk about David Gilmour's second guitar solo, which closes out the track.
We absolutely do.
It is widely regarded by musicians and critics alike as one of the greatest rock solos ever recorded.
It is a masterclass in phrasing, tone, and emotional delivery. Gilmour uses this incredibly thick, sustained tone.
Yeah, it sounds massive.
Right. He was heavy on a specific distortion pedal called a big muff, paired with a delay that makes the guitar sound almost like it is crying out.
It really does wail.
But within the context of the Wall's narrative, it is so much more than just a display of technical guitar skill.
Here is where it gets really interesting, because I have to push back a little on how we normally consume this solo.
Okay, let's hear it.
When we think of massive closing guitar solos in stadium rock, we usually think of them as triumphant.
Sure, the big finale.
Right. It is the fist-pumping rock god moment. It is the part of the show where the pyrotechnics go off, the crowd goes absolutely wild, and the hero conquers the stage.
Standard rock and roll stuff.
Exactly. But based on the narrative we've just unpacked from these sources, this legendary solo cannot possibly be a victory lap.
No, it cannot.
It sounds to me like a tragedy disguised as an anthem.
And your instinct is entirely correct. That is the brilliance of the illusion. The solo sounds huge and soaring, so we instinctively want to cheer for it.
We want that release.
Right. But narratively, it is the ultimate synthesis of everything we've just discussed. It takes the cold reality of the doctor's demands and the disconnected safety of Pink's fever dream, and it violently crashes them together.
So it is not a triumphant return to form for Pink.
Not at all. The soaring notes Gilmour is playing aren't notes of victory. They capture the exquisite, agonizing pain of being completely detached from the world around you.
It is the sound of the duct tape failing, to go back to our pit crew mechanic analogy.
Yes.
The engine is finally exploding. It is the sound of Pink's mind finally just letting go, completely fracturing and drifting off into the void.
Exactly.
The corporate show is going to march on. They are going to wheel him out onto the stage, but his soul is entirely gone.
And yet, Gilmour makes that psychological fracture sound so incredibly beautiful that we cannot help but cheer for it in a crowded stadium.
Wow.
Which brings us right back to your opening thought about the paradox of the crowd holding at their lighters.
Right.
We cheer for the sheer aesthetic beauty of the music, entirely missing the profound human tragedy it actually represents.
We become the audience that Pink is trying to escape from.
Precisely. We are complicit. But when you understand the mechanics behind it, you know, the cynical narrative, the tension of the B minor verses, the false sanctuary of the D major choruses, the friction between Waters and Gilmour, you realize why it endures. True masterpieces are born when the narrative doesn't just sit on top of the music, but perfectly marries the structure of the sound itself.
It is a perfect alignment of story and frequency.
It really is.
So to summarize what we've discovered today, Comfortably Numb is not just a catchy rock anthem to play in the background. It is a meticulously constructed, terrifying scene of ultimate human isolation. It pits a cynical corporate enabler against a fundamentally broken man. And it uses brilliant shifts in music theory to make us physically feel the overwhelming allure of checking out of a hostile reality.
Perfectly said.
It is a testament to how art can capture the darkest, most terrifying moments of the human experience and turn them into something undeniably timeless.
And this raises an important question. You know, one final lingering thought for you to consider.
Okay.
We know that Pink's childhood fever made him feel disconnected, yet safe. We know the corporate machine views him as an asset to be used and discarded.
Right.
So if being comfortably numb provides a warm, nostalgic safety in an otherwise predatory world, is Pink's catatonic state truly a tragic defeat at the hands of the corporate machine? Or, in a twisted, paradoxical way, is it Pink's only successful rebellion? Has he managed to find an impenetrable sanctuary deep within his own mind, a place where the doctor's demands can never actually reach him?
Oh, wow. That is a haunting thought to end on, a tragic defeat or an impenetrable sanctuary. We will leave you to ponder that the next time you hear those opening chords. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Go put on some high-quality headphones, pull up the track, and listen to it with entirely fresh ears. We will see you next time.